Hi everyone, Angus Campbell here, Tuesday the 8th of October, and we're going to attempt to do the final bottom end build following the work we did yesterday to try and free the cam off a little, which seems to have worked. So what we'll need to do here is obviously take the cases apart. The crank is underneath that cover at the back there. Got all the sundry components and tools laid out, obligatory cup of tea. So let me split the cases again and I'll bring you back. Right, I think we're all set. So the sequence of events is that we've got the left hand case here, which has got the roller bearing in it. And first of all, we're going to fit this onto the crank so that we don't have any problems trying to fit the other way around, the rollers already on the crank into the outer race, because I've known roller cages to get damaged doing that, so that's why we're doing it that way around. And then once we've done that, we're going to put the chain case outer cover on this side, lay it down on its back like so, and then that will enable us to put the camshaft into its bush in the left hand case, but more importantly on the inside of the bush, on the other side of the camshaft, there'll be the shuttle valve and the spring. And what we can do then is we can lay the right hand cover on top, and in that way then, one, we know the rollers on the main bearing seated properly, and two, there's no risk then of the shuttle valve for the crankcase breather behind the end of the camshaft getting out of line with respect to its stubs into the slots on the end of the camshaft to ensure that it turns with the camshaft. So that's the logic behind that. The other thing to bear in mind is that we've got to ensure that the jointing faces are clean. There's no gasket for crankcase halves, so it's just a case of using what the manual calls jointing compound, smear of that on the surface, but obviously we'll use the usual silicone. And then the only other thing to bear in mind then on the right hand case over here is to remember the inner thrust bearing on the inside of the main bearing on that half of that case, and for that we'll sort of stick that in position with grease, which tends to work pretty well. So let me just make sure I've got everything in order, and then we'll kick this off. Okay, I think we're just about ready for the off. The bench is a little cluttered, but hopefully once everything gets together, then we'll have a bit more room to manoeuvre. One thing that I omitted to add to the sequence events in the last clip is that I am going to sit the barrels on these cases and lightly tighten the barrels down as I tighten up the outer bolts and nuts on the cases to try and retain alignment. And that was a technique we used yesterday just to ensure we could maintain not so much stress or tightness on the cam, as it is a little tight, but it's a lot better now than it was. Right, first things first, so all we're going to do is put the left hand case with the roller bearing onto the crank, and actually I'm going to do that again because the rollers are trying to come out and we don't want to do that. We can hold them from this side, but it is a little difficult. There we go. That's it. So the bearing, the rollers have maintained their position in the outer race, but the inner race just needs to be tapped down onto the shaft, as it's a nice tight snug fit, which is exactly what we want. There we go, just nice light gentle tap down, obviously without disturbing the oil seal that's here, the new oil seal that we've fitted, but also to ensure that we don't actually hit the end of the crank as well, because there's some important threads on that. Damage to those now would be an absolute disaster. So that's been successfully done. So now we're going to turn the whole lot over onto the primary case. Like so. Right, so what I can do now, just give you a bit of a better view. Okay. Next job then is put the shuttle valve. So this is the crankcase breather shuttle valve with its two tabs, and those two tabs slots into the camshaft like so. So that's what you've got to maintain. And on the inside of that shuttle valve, to ensure that there's some pressure pressure placed from it against the mating half on the blind end of the bush, then there's a spring that goes on the inside too, like so. So that's what we've got to aim to do. So first of all, shuttle valve and spring goes in, and then we can see where the tabs are and place the cam in to roughly that position. And you know when it's in the right position because you can push the cam up and down and let it rebound against that spring. So that's good. So that's in position. Next, we need to place a thin smear of jointing compound around the whole face. Get you in a little bit closer. I've already cleaned off these faces so they're all nice and dry and free of oil. Oh, I hate these types of nozzle. They're just too slow. Let's get rid of that. Do it straight from the tube. Fingers were made before anything else, so they're obviously the best tool for the job. Obviously once we've got this on, we want to move fairly quickly so we can get a good seal before it starts to set. So reasonable accuracy with a bit of speed is the order of the day. And this is the better crankcase half to put the sealer on, because you've got the flange, the jointing flange on this side, so you can make sure the sealer is sitting in the corner of that flange and face. Okay, there we go. So lid on that before it sets. Next thing before we put the right hand half on is we'll get the thrust washer. If you look back at previous episodes, there's quite a bit of commentary about this, about the fact that this item isn't identified in the A70 supplement. So we just need a thin smear of grease on the back side of that. There's no other shims required, because the shims sit on the outside of the journal on the right hand crankcase half, on the outside of the crankcase, underneath a thrust washer underneath the pinion, so we don't need to worry about any further shims on the inside of the crankcases. Okay, that's on. So we can now sit this case on top. And the first thing to locate is actually the camshaft. There she goes, and there you fell. I shan't edit that out, all part of the fun. Right, the cases are together. I'm going to use a couple of the external bolts Pull the outer cover off now, we don't need that. Bring that across and show you. So I've got one of the external bolts underneath here in, we'll put another one in at the top here, one of the BSCs. Just gently pulling this together at the moment, not too much force. And then we'll also put one of the internal nuts in on the studs on the inside of the primary chain case here. So we know that will hold together now. Blimey, thunderstorm outside. Take a little bit of locating these stud nuts, and also the reason I'm using a box spanner here is because there's not a lot of room to work in. As you can see, and it's just the box spanner. It's got a thinner profile than sockets. Okay, that's on. Two more bolts at the front. The second BSC one. So there's two bolts at the top here that, sorry, not BSC, UNC, coarse, because they're screwing directly into the alley. Below that there's two nuts and bolts on flanges, so these are UNF, because they're screwing into steel nuts. I'm using spring washers all around. So that's all the nuts and bolts loosely fitted. So what I'm going to do before I torque up these crankcase halves is I'm going to put the barrels on and just use maybe 4 nuts. Okay, there go the barrels. And on the A70, these are the later barrels, marked up 711033. So these are for 3/8 base flange studs rather than the original 5/16. Sorry about that, you fell over again. Right, where were we? Last nut. .3/8 spanner. Sorry. 9/16. So I'm just going to tighten these loosely. So not too tight. Right, there's no real torque on those, but now I'm going to slacken them off half a turn. In fact, not even half a turn really. Maybe one flat. And now we'll tighten up. Probably hearing the thunder and lightning and rain outside. It's absolutely chucking it down. Donner at Blitzen. Okay. And there she is. Silicon sealer is still relatively fluid. Now obviously we have to take the barrels back off because there's one nut still that we've got to fit, which is to join the two legs together in the centre. So we'll take the barrels off now. And then we can put the nut and spring washer, the final one, on the stud here between the two central locating arms. Like so. Now we'll just leave that to cure up, and then I might come back later on and check those. In fact, while I'm here, I'm not sure if there is a torque setting. For those, so let's just check. Engine B. This is a copy of the workshop manual, so I don't mind this getting dirty. Let me just bring you back in a sec. I just need to find that in the book. I can't remember where it is. Okay, I've found the table in the workshop manual, and there is one setting which is for the crankcase stud nuts, and there's 3 of them here, 1, 2, 3, and they should be set at 16 to 18 pounds, so I'll come back and just check those. But in the meantime, that's it together. Just while we're here, the reason why I'm not leaving the barrels on, obviously other than the fact that we've got the pistons to fit yet on the rods, which as you can see I've got protected at the moment so they don't get dented. It's because firstly I'm going to fit this engine, or this lower end, into the frame as is, because the barrels are very heavy, and once the crankcases are in the frame we can build up from there, and these will then be quite a lot easier to fit into the frame without damaging the frame and being able to locate. But there's a bit of work to do yet, because the next stage is that we've got to fit the rear engine plates to this. Now, in its history, when it was semi-chopperized years and years ago, the rear engine plates were chromed, and they're in very good condition, so I'm going to leave them chromed, just as a bit of provenance, if you like, a bit of history, as it's led such a hard life. But these are really quite nice. They're not going to be seen that much right at the back of the engine. So there's those to fit, but also those fit onto this lug here, but in order with bolts and nuts. But in order to get the bolts through, then there's also a plate, a removable plate on this side of what would be the chain cavity, and that's to give you enough room to actually slot the bolts in from this way. Once those are in, we can then put that cover in, and that's a black painted cover. There it is in the box, black painted cover. That fits like so. Just in there with 3 screws. But before we do that, it's not in bad condition at all actually, but there is a bit of paint off it. So we'll reprime and paint that, which is only a 5-minute job as well. So we've got that to do, and then the final thing to mention in this episode before we close it down, now that big job's done, is that the other reason why we're not fitting the barrels is because Although these barrels are on standard and the bores are in very good condition, there's no lip, and we've got standard pistons, so we were going to just hone these, but unfortunately the bores have been smashed by the rod flailing around when it let go on both sides, and it's also cracked up here too. These barrels are quite difficult to get hold of in good condition. However, you can re-sleeve them, and there's a specialist company in Lincolnshire that will re-sleeve these, and also I've found a set of sleeves in the US, and they're on the way. So there's a lot of work to do yet on the barrels, but we are going to keep these barrels and use them. They're the originals, and as I say, replacements of these later barrels, which have what appears to be a part number stamp of 711033. You won't find that in the manual. It might be a casting part number, but that denotes these as a late barrel, and they're terribly difficult to get hold of. So we're going to keep this one. However, although there's a bit of work to do on that, once we get the bottom end in the frame, we can build up a lot of this motor. So the gearbox, the primary side, the timing side, we can build all that up in the frame. So and we can do the barrel and head last. So that's the plan. So there we are, everybody. The bench still looks like a bit of a tip, but at least we can tidy it up now, and some big lumps have been bolted together. And we'll end the episode there. As I say, next stop will be putting the rear engine plates on and putting this into the frame. I'm not sure when we'll do that, because I'm away for a few days shortly, but that probably will be the next episode. Right, I'll stop rambling on. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. Hope that's been interesting. We finally got there, I think, and look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thanks again, everybody. Cheers for now. Bye.